The neighborhood of Willow Creek was the kind of place where the grass was measured with a ruler and the silence was strictly enforced after 8 p.m. I had lived there for 10 years, mostly keeping to myself, but the HOA board, led by a woman named Beatrice Vance, had recently decided that my property was a stain on the collective aesthetic. It started with a notice about my mailbox. Then came the citation for the shade of green I'd painted my front door. But the real war began when I lost my dog, Cooper, to a hit-and-run driver on our street because there was no barrier to keep him in the yard. The HOA bylaws forbade traditional wooden or chain-link fences in the front to maintain an open-concept flow. Grief-stricken and determined not to lose my new rescue, a high-strung German shepherd named Scout, I decided to take a different route. I didn't build a wall. I installed a state-of-the-art, low-visibility, perimeter-pulsed electric containment system. To the naked eye, it looked like a thin, elegant wire running along a decorative stone border. To anyone or anything trying to cross it, it was a very clear no, the warning shot. "You can't have that, Arthur," Beatrice said, standing on the edge of my driveway 3 days after the installation. She was clutching a clipboard like a shield. Behind her stood Marcus, the HOA treasurer, who always looked like he was smelling something sour. "It's not a fence, Beatrice," I said, wiping grease from my hands. I'd been working on my vintage motorcycle. "It's a specialized pet containment system. It's nearly invisible. It doesn't break the open concept rule. It's a liability," Marcus chimed in. "And it's ugly. Those little warning signs you put up, they look like yellow teeth in a green mouth. Take it down or we'll fine you $500 a day." I stood up, taller than both of them. "The signs are required by state law for safety. The system stays. Scout stays safe. If you have a problem, send me a formal notice." They did more than that. Over the next month, I received a barrage of letters. They claimed the fence interfered with local wildlife, despite the fact that Beatrice's own indoor-outdoor cat was a known menace to the local bird population. They claimed it was a danger to children, even though the pulse was a non-lethal sting designed to startle, not injure. The tension reached a boiling point during the annual Willow Creek Garden Gala. The board had decided to host the start of the neighborhood walk right in front of my house, specifically to point out my rebellious eyesore, the incident. The morning of the gala, I saw Beatrice and a group of 5 other residents huddled on the sidewalk. They were pointing at my yard. Scout was sitting calmly on the porch, watching them. He knew exactly where the line was. "It's an abomination," I heard Beatrice say. "And I bet it's not even legal. Watch this." She reached into her oversized designer bag and pulled out a long, metal-tipped umbrella. Before anyone could stop her, she lunged forward, intending to poke at the wire to see if it was truly live, or perhaps to prove that it was a hazard. She didn't just touch the wire. She tripped on the uneven pavement of the sidewalk and fell forward. Her umbrella hit the wire, and her hand hit the stone border. The system did exactly what it was programmed to do. It delivered a sharp, rhythmic pulse of electricity. Beatrice didn't get electrocuted. The voltage wasn't high enough for that, but the surprise caused her to let out a yelp that sounded like a tea kettle screaming. She scrambled back, tumbling into Marcus. In the chaos, she claimed she had been assaulted by a lethal booby trap. Within 20 minutes, the police were there. Within 2 hours, I was served with a temporary restraining order demanding the removal of the device. Within a week, the HOA filed a lawsuit for creation of a public nuisance and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The day in court. The courtroom was packed with Willow Creek residents. Beatrice sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a neck brace that looked suspiciously new. Her lawyer, a man who looked like he charged by the syllable, stood up and painted a picture of me as a suburban madman. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "Mr. Henderson has turned a peaceful sanctuary into a minefield. He has installed a high-voltage cage that has already injured a pillar of the community. Mrs. Beatrice Vance, we are seeking the immediate removal of the fence and $50,000 in damages." My lawyer, Sarah, was a young woman with a sharp mind and a low tolerance for nonsense. She didn't look worried. When it was our turn, she didn't call me to the stand first. She called a surprise witness, the technician who installed the fence. "Mr. Miller," Sarah asked the technician, Can you describe the voltage of the system installed at Mr. Henderson's home? Sure, Miller said. It's a standard 12-volt pulse DC system. It's less powerful than the static shock you get from rubbing your feet on a carpet and touching a doorknob. It's designed to trigger a muscle reflex, not cause pain or damage. And is it legal? Totally. It meets all municipal codes. In fact, it's safer than a traditional fence because it doesn't block sightlines for drivers. Then Sarah turned her attention to Beatrice. Mrs. Vance, Sarah said, walking toward the plaintiff's table, you claim you were assaulted by this fence. But isn't it true that you were standing on Mr. Henderson's property line after being repeatedly warned to stay away? I was performing my duties as board president. Beatrice snapped. And isn't it also true, Sarah continued, pulling out a tablet, that the Willow Creek HOA bylaws specifically state that invisible barriers for the containment of domestic animals are encouraged to prevent the clutter of wooden fencing? Beatrice froze. That refers to the underground collars, not a wire. The bylaws don't specify the technology, Mrs. Vance, Sarah said coolly. They specify the result. But let's get to the real reason we're here. Sarah played a video on the courtroom monitors. It was footage from my doorbell camera, the one the HOA didn't know I had. It showed the morning of the gala. It showed Beatrice leaning over the line, intentionally trying to poke the wire with her umbrella. It showed her tripping over her own feet. And most importantly, it showed her standing up immediately after, laughing with Marcus and saying, I think that's enough to get the judge to shut him down. The courtroom went silent. The neck brace Beatrice was wearing suddenly looked very, very ridiculous. The verdict. The judge, a no-nonsense man named Miller, didn't even go back to his chambers to deliberate. He leaned over his bench and looked directly at Beatrice and Marcus. This court finds that the defendant, Mr. Henderson, acted entirely within his rights, the judge stated. He installed a legal, safe, and regulated system to protect his property and his pet. Mrs. Vance, your behavior and the behavior of this board is a textbook definition of harassment. The judge slammed his gavel. Case dismissed. Furthermore, I am awarding the defendant his legal fees to be paid by the Willow Creek HOA. And if I see another frivolous lawsuit from this board in my courtroom, I will hold the individual members in contempt. The aftermath. The walk out of the courtroom was the sweetest moment of my life. Beatrice tried to scurry away, but a local reporter, whom Sarah had tipped off, was waiting for her. The headline the next day read, HOA president trips over her own ambition. When I got home, I took Scout for a walk. We passed Marcus, who was busy taking down a property for sale sign in his yard. He couldn't afford the special assessment the HOA had to levy to pay my legal fees. I stopped at the edge of my yard and looked at the thin, elegant wire. It was barely visible against the stone. It didn't block the view of the sunset, and it didn't hurt anyone who didn't go looking for trouble. The HOA tried to pass a new rule a month later, specifically banning pulsed wire systems. But the neighborhood had shifted. The younger families, tired of Beatrice's tyranny, staged a coup and voted the entire board out. The new board president? A guy 3 houses down who had 2 dogs and a deep appreciation for privacy. I sat on my porch that evening, Scout at my feet. For the first time in years, Willow Creek actually felt like a community. I had installed an electric fence to keep my dog in, but in the end, it was the shock of the truth that finally cleared the air. The board thought they could bully me into submission, but they forgot one simple thing. When you push someone too hard, eventually they're going to push back, and sometimes they'll have 12 volts of justice waiting for you.